Hey and welcome back. In this lesson we're going to look at how to refine our track if we got a very bad solve error. So let's say your solve error is bigger than 1 or maybe it's 5 or 10, then we know we've got a bad tracker somewhere that we need to remove. So in our case we don't have any bad tracks at the moment, so I'm going to manually create some really bad tracks, and then we're going to see how we can refine them and delete them and to create a better solve. So I'm going to go back to the track tab here on the left hand side because we're going to add some new trackers to the scene. Make sure you're on frame 1, and I'm just going to add some really bad tracks here in the clouds maybe. So maybe let's add one here, and I'm just going to track that forward, Control T, and you can see it's actually tracking that not too bad, but I'm just going to break this track manually. So I'm going to go to any random frame and I'm simply just going to drag this tracker to maybe a new position and just go to another section, just drag it out. So I'm literally just breaking this track completely. So you can even see here in the graph at the bottom, you can see some interesting things happening here, and that is just showing our very bad track that we are creating here. So I'm kind of just moving this around to create the worst track possible. So now let's see if we go back to our solve tab here on the left hand side, and I'm simply going to click on solve camera motion. Now watch what's going to happen to our solve error. Currently we have a solve error of 0.11, which is great. So now if I click on solve camera motion, that number just jumped up to 1.33. So that means our track has got an error that's bigger than 1 pixel, which is not great. So now we need to figure out how we can make this better, how we can get a better solve error basically for this track. Alright, so what we're going to do next is on the left hand side under the solve menu, you'll see a cleanup section. Now if we expand this cleanup section, you'll see a few parameters here. And the only thing you need to change here is make sure the type is set to select. And that means it's only going to select the bad trackers. It's not going to delete them or anything. It's just going to highlight them for you. And then you can decide if you want to delete them or if you want to retrack them or whatever you want to do. So make sure that's on select. And then I'm going to click this filter tracks button. And it's going to bring up this little filter tracks menu here in the viewport in the corner. And if I expand this, we can now basically scrub through, and it's going to basically highlight all the bad tracks if we start at a big number. If we drag this all the way down to, let's say, 0, it's going to select all the tracks because 0 is kind of, it's including, it's a threshold, so it's including all the tracks. Now if you slowly move this up, if you increase this number, you'll see it's going to deselect some of the better trackers in the scene. So you can see there it's starting to deselect the trackers because those are all under this threshold. And if we go bigger, you can see it's still keeping this bad track highlighted because that's just, it's got the worst error possible. Even if I go up all the way to like 48, you can see at the bottom it says identified 1 problematic tracks, and that's the one that's highlighted right here. We can go all the way up to 70, it's still highlighted, 90, 100, 105. Let's see up to where it actually goes. So here we go. You can see, so it's kind of selecting it somewhere around here. So 160, so if I bring it down 165, there you can see it's highlighted. So that just means it's filtering out all the good tracks from the bad tracks, and it's highlighted. So now we can simply delete this track by pressing X and then delete that track, and now we can resolve our camera motion. So look at the solve error 1.33. I'm going to click on solve camera motion again, and now we can see we've got a great solve error of 0.11 again, and yeah, that's just a perfect solve error right there. So yeah, the filter tracks basically is just an option to filter out all the bad tracks in your scene so that you can decide if you want to delete them and then resolve your camera motion, or maybe you want to retrack those trackers. So another way to do this is to look at the tracks here in this top window, and next to each track you will see the solve error for that specific track. And what you can do is you can look for high numbers here, anything that's maybe higher than 1 with a solve error of 1. You can simply click on those tracks and it's going to highlight it in the viewport, and then you can press X to delete that tracker with a high solve error. So that's just another way kind of to look at your tracks and delete the bad ones. So what you want to do is you just want to get rid of all the bad tracks, keep all the good tracks, resolve by pressing this solve camera motion button until your solve error is less than 1. Then you know your track is good and we can continue with building or setting up our tracking scene. So go ahead and save your project now, and I will see you in the next lesson.